Hi friends, welcome to my book club. I'm Marley and this is the Golden Gator Society. This is just a little space that I created to be able to wax intellectual, to philosophize and talk about the books that I absolutely love and kind of the meaning that they've brought into my life and the things that I think about when I read them. I often am reading things that are like almost academic, really kind of heavy and weighty. And there's another part of me that really likes to read books that are just fantasy and they're soft and they're light and they leave you with a really good feeling. So I'm not a book editor. I'm not going to criticize any books or authors' writing or anything like that. The only books I'm going to talk about are books that I just really love. And so if you want a safe space to be able to explore these books that I've read that you also have read and really enjoyed them, then you're absolutely in the right place. So the first book that I want to talk about is Midnight Gardens, which is the first book in the Daughters of Midnight series by Ellen Dugan. She is one of my all-time favorite authors. Her stories and the characters that she creates are really special to me. I go back to reading these different series that she has created time and time again. And I always gain something else when I read them. I always see a different side of the characters she's put together, or am able to reflect back on those characters that I love and how their situation might apply to me and my life. So, introducing you to the world of Ames Crossing, which is in Middle America. It's in a really special place because it's near water, it's by a river, and the town has a lot of history. And it's kind of cool because America is newer, right? Than like if you go to Europe or something, their history is like, it's in lights, it's in colors, it's all over the place. Like you can see that because they have more of it and they've built more things around it. But there's really special places in America too. And I think that this magical world of Ames Crossing would be one of those where like you can feel and sense that the history of the town is so important to the people that they've tried to maintain it in their architecture, but it's also interwoven into the actual earth and into the land, which I think is so cool. It's like it's an energetic power spot in the world. And the other thing that's really neat that she has built in is that there's a lot of young people who are coming back to this town and who are wanting to start new businesses and are wanting to like revive the community of the town. And I love that because I'm seeing it happen in the real world too, is that people are wanting that sense of community again. And even though that can come with its challenges, that can come with people who are narrow-minded, it can come with people who just aren't necessarily looking to change. And so when they see young people coming in, or even people who are not so young coming in and wanting to make changes, that can feel threatening to them. And because these characters are so special, that also gets interwoven into the stories. But so we have this special little town in the middle of America, and we meet our first daughter of Midnight, Drew, who had a really difficult time. She was living in Chicago and her husband betrayed her. And when I first meet Drew and I start kind of hearing how she thinks and what she's looking at, I was like, nah, would Drew be my friend? Would she be someone that I would spend time with? I don't know. She seems really buttoned up, right? She's very like posh and sleek, and she's a book writer in Chicago. And I was like, whoa, like if anything, she's kind of intimidating. But she has this tragedy and she finds out that she's not able to have children, and she gets betrayed by her husband, and she comes home to her hometown to be healed by being with her sisters and her gran in her hometown. And like as you start to get to know her, like there's this beautiful metaphor of like her physical outward appearance of being buttoned up and being polished and wearing really fancy clothes, as like an armor for her. It's this persona that she's created for herself that's like, I have everything all together. And that cracks. And when it cracks, she also physically transforms herself and puts herself in a little cocoon of clothing to get back to her roots. And she starts gardening again. And when she does, she wears her baseball cap really low, and she's not wearing makeup, and she's, you know, wearing more baggy clothes that she can get dirty. And I think it's really interesting because, like, I certainly do that. Like, when I'm not feeling well, I want to wrap myself up. I don't want to be seen, right? I want to cover myself up and have a place where I can be introspective. And so I'm curious how other people do this and translate this. And it might not be that, like, you're posh and that you wear really fancy clothing. But it could be that you're gothic, or that you like to wear really bright colors. Like, I think that that's something for me. Like, I'll wear really bright colors sometimes, but then when I'm just not feeling it and I don't want people to see me, or I have something going on, the colors kind of shift, right? They're not going to be loud patterns and everything. I want to kind of go undetected. And that's what she does, is she's kind of going undercover in her gardens to be able to give herself that time to heal. But she doesn't do that good of a job, because she catches the eye of the new neighbor. And we love the handsome stranger. Absolutely, we always do. And even though the man isn't always a handsome stranger, in this case it is. We have Garrett, who lives next door, and he's restoring the winery with his friends, and he's restored this Italian villa next door. And she had actually spotted him on her way to Ames Crossing, and he's this mysterious thin man that has these magical eyes, and he noticed her right away. And when he sees her in the garden and working in all of these things, he gets a little bit perplexed, because somebody with fancy fingernails wouldn't necessarily be scrounging around in the dirt. And what I think is so awesome about what she did with this character is that, like, Garrett is also posh. Garrett wears fancy watches, and he's a little bit rigid, and you know, has that kind of like quiet, intellectual, good-looking nature to him, but is so polished. And because that's the place where Drew came from, and that was her shell and her persona, and that's what her husband had as also his persona, she sees those outside markers as a threat. And she starts making all of these assumptions about him. And I'm curious there too, like, sometimes, even if it's something that we do ourselves, we can have a bias against somebody else that's in that same situation. Or if we have something bad happen, all of a sudden we write people off altogether. And it's like, yeah, there's conventions there for a reason, right? There's stereotypes there for a reason. Sometimes, and you'll find other characters in the Daughters of Midnight series where I'm like, oh, this person meets all the stereotypes. But they're not always true, right? Just because you like to or have the means to be able to wear fancy watches and beautiful clothing, it doesn't necessarily mean that you take it for granted, that you don't appreciate it and aren't grateful for what you have, or aren't able to get down in the dirt sometimes. So when she meets this guy, she's like, this guy's arrogant, this guy's a snob, I don't want anything to do with him. And the thing that I love about this story so much, though, is like, it's not just about Garrett and Drew getting together, but there's another player, and that's little Brooke. And Brooke is the ward of Garrett. It's this young 11-year-old girl that's come into his care, and Drew gets the opportunity to start interacting with her. And she doesn't like the way that Garrett is taking care of this little girl. She becomes kind of protective of her. But at the same time, like, all of their interactions are just so beautiful. Like, I love it because it's almost like she's learning to understand some of the pain that she's gone through while trying to figure out, how do I interact with this young girl when I don't have the experience of being a mother, but I innately want to take care of this little girl, and I also don't want to scare her off because she's been in this difficult situation, just like Drew's been scared off from wanting to kind of engage with the world and feel really confident in who she is and in herself. And she gets to go through that with this dance with this young girl. And they have these really cool interactions. And Drew is just so real with this girl. And Brooke doesn't really know what to do with it. She hasn't had anybody interact with her in a way where she's like, hey, you know, maybe I do have a little bit of authority over you because I'm an adult. But that's not what I'm going to lead with. I'm going to lead with trying to be compassionate and try to understand who you are and meet you where you're at. And I'm also going to try to challenge you a little bit and try to help you to see outside of yourself and get a different perspective, but know that even if I'm not agreeing with you, that you're loved and that you're safe and that you have a place with me. And so I think about this art teacher that I had when I was younger, and I was in a situation where I didn't have a lot of friends to eat lunch with or spend time with, and the art teacher offered for me to come and eat lunch there. And so every day when the art teacher was there, I would come in and I would eat lunch in the art room. And we would just sit and talk. Sometimes we would do art together, but mostly we would just be sitting and talking. And she was my friend, and she had just a different perspective. And it was so different to have an adult that wasn't trying to tell me what to do, wasn't trying to manage me, but was trying to meet me where I was at. And also, you know, give me some additional perspective on how to move through things. So I'm curious what other people have in terms of experience with other adults that have maybe helped them feel really safe and feel supported when they were going through transition, because I think that those are so needed. Like sometimes it's a coach, sometimes it's an art teacher, sometimes though it's a neighbor, and that's what Drew is to Brooke. So I feel like most of this book, like it's that magic of the two of them helping each other heal, because the little girl had the tragedy of, you know, the death of her parents, which is, you know, it's unimaginable for an 11-year-old girl to go through that. And also, you know, when you divorce someone, that feels like a death. Just because it's something that was by choice, it wasn't necessarily by choice. It was something that had to be done. Even if it was your decision, it still is something that, you know, it can cause you to collapse a little bit. And it feels like the death of the life that you had, of the relationship that you had, the support, all of that. So they're both mourning, and they're both trying to figure out who they are. And they're able to do that. And Drew is doing that in such a beautiful, protective way, which is causing this conflict with her and Garrett. And something I just absolutely love also about, you know, not just this story, but Ellen Dugan does this all of the time, is she makes these men very real. Like in the sense that they're not perfect and they put their foot in their mouth all the time. And like Garrett puts his foot in his mouth. Like he's making assumptions and he's saying things that are off kilter, and he is getting really like snippy and emotional a lot of the time and being irrational. And it's like, at first you're like, wait a minute, why would she want this guy? It can't just be because he's hot. Like that's not enough. Like for Drew, like this character that we've developed a relationship with and we love her, we don't want her to have to be with some guy that's just in posh clothing and is being like all domineering. But the thing is that like, that's not who he is. Some of it is the way that Drew is interpreting what he is saying, and she's misinterpreting it because of her perspective and where she's at with her healing journey. So it's like, as you start to see Garrett develop in the book, you know, he has to take one step forward and 4 steps back to be able to have a conversation with Drew. Because he's like, wait a minute, the way that I'm approaching things and the things that I'm saying, she's taking them all wrong. And that's not what I mean. And I'm really appreciating her, and I'm noticing her for more than just her outward beauty. I'm noticing her for the special way that she's working with her gardens and the special way that she's interacting with this young girl. And so he sees that, and it takes him a while to be able to find his words and to be able to earn her trust. So it's this nice dance. And there's a certain point where he has to just be really straightforward in order to get her attention. And then, of course, they come together. And that's what I want, and that's also why I love these books, is because, yep, they're going to get together. And it's like, that's what you want. And they don't always get together right away. But in this situation, right, they ended up growing and understanding each other. And Drew was able to look past some of her assumptions and some of the wounds that she was carrying and projecting out onto him, and was able to find a balance and stopped hiding herself, and was able to be a complete person, because she can be posh and she can be this magical garden witch. She can be someone who really cares about family and is a children's book author, and also likes to go eat half a pizza. She's all of these things, because she's a whole person. And because she was where she was when Garrett met her, he was able to see a lot more of her than I think she probably would have allowed others to see if she had started again. And that's what I think about too when I've, broken up with people and then started a relationship again. Am I starting the same way? Like, am I setting myself up for failure by building up the same persona again and leading with things that aren't going to really allow the person to see the real me? So I'm curious what other people think too, like how, if they notice that they're repeating the same cycles, if they're finding different ways to put on their own armor and not really show who they are. Or are they showing who they are and then having somebody reject that? And that kind of confirms in your head, right? Like, oh no, I showed my real self and they didn't like it. I need to go back and retreat and show that other person that I was showing the world. And it's like, not necessarily. Just because somebody wasn't ready for it doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything wrong with you. And it could be that you showed too much too soon. The way that you showed it just didn't land, or that person's just not the right person. That's totally fine. There's a million people in the world. Not everybody's going to like everybody else. But I think that there's so many facets to people, and Drew is so multifaceted. And in her engagements with her sisters too, she has Ella and Cammie and her gran, and her two sisters are also trying to help her heal and also reintroduce themselves, right? Like, they took on the responsibilities of taking care of their grandmother. And when Drew comes back, she has some judgments about what was going on. She was upset that the gardens didn't look the way that they had when she was there before. And it's like these sisters were doing the best that they can. So, Ella took some time to warm up to her again, where Cammie was ready to embrace her with open arms. So there was some healing that took place there too, some relearning and some rebuilding of relationships, so that way the sisters could come together and support each other. But they all had their best interest at heart, and everybody wanted what was best for Drew. There was a little bit of conflict with Ella and Drew because it seemed like Ella was running around and kind of sharing Drew's story with too many people. But her sister was away, and you'll notice that she was kind of sharing information with some very strategic people to be able to spark interest, not to triangulate and just spread rumors about her sister. It was more like, hey, here's some important information you could know. Gardening store friend of Garrett, so that way Garrett has a little bit more information about this woman who, Ella maybe had an intuition after getting to know him that he would be smitten with her when she comes. So all in all, like this book, as you're reading and seeing Drew develop and come home to not just her home, but come home to herself, you see how this family works together, and you see how like fresh starts come from unexpected places, and you can't always predict the timing of things, and you can't always know who is going to be the person that's going to help you heal or that you're going to resonate with. And for Drew, in that case, that's Brooke and that's Garrett. And she's able to reestablish herself and find balance with who she is. And it makes me feel so good to see that. And we start to get to know the other sisters too. And I'm really excited about the next book because it's one of my favorite sisters of all of the sisters that's in the second book, and her story is, it's a wild ride, and it makes me laugh a lot, makes me cry a little bit, but it makes me laugh a lot. So I hope that you had fun getting to know Drew and seeing her come out of her shell and come home to herself, because it felt really nice to me, and I felt kind of anchored in the sense that just because you go through a big transition, your life unravels, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to abandon who you are. Take some time, like it's okay to take some time and be able to retreat and go inward, but also be open to the possibilities that are all around you. Spend time with the earth because it's so healing, and some of your best friends can be the flowers and the trees, and that's what it is for Drew, is those friends with flowers, and being able to see meaning in nature, and learning to use her intuition again. So that is my wish for you, is that you get to connect with your intuition, make friends with yourself, and make friends with nature, and be open to all the possibilities, no matter your hardships. That's the message that I'm taking away from this book. Thank you for taking some time to reflect on it with me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.